ahead and thank you. You're on it. All right, well, welcome everybody. It's good to see everybody on screen today on this sunny Wednesday, May 25th. We are meeting as a subcommittee, the Sewerage subcommittee of the larger Commission on Connecticut's Development and Future, and really pleased with some of the progress we're making, just gaining an understanding of the materials. And I know my co-chair, Donna, is with us today. I don't know if she's available to hop on screen. She's having some connectivity issues, so I'm not sure she's able to comment. Donna, are you available to comment?
Hi, sorry. I have like a slight bit of coverage, but I don't think my camera is working at this point. So, but thank you. I'm okay to move forward.
Sure, great. Well, again, I trust everybody has the agenda. Donna and I have been speaking regularly about how to move forward and hearing from several of you. We've had some overviews by both the Department of Public Health as well as the DEEP on sort of the landscape of sewerage and septic in the state of Connecticut. And I think what's really important at this point is that each of us really participate in the subcommittee by really having conversation today. I know that's difficult over Zoom, so we'll do our best to moderate this, but I think what's going to be important is that each of us learns what the others are bringing to the table and the perspective with respect to sewerage in Connecticut and development in Connecticut. So I think what we'd love to do is really go around and, I can call on individuals as we go and gain an understanding of, what brings you to the subcommittee, where your interests lie, and what your understanding or your hope is for the goals of the subcommittee. So as we go through the agenda, I think we can review some of what we've heard from DPH as well as DEEP. Again, just that broad understanding that we gained over the last two meetings with respect to sewerage. And then I think we need to delve in to the problem that we are faced with. I think that is multifaceted. I do not think that there is any one problem. And so I know Donna and I would value all of your thoughts on what those problems are that we're faced with, what the issues are, and that way we can move forward as a group, as a subcommittee, and really delve into potential solutions for those problems. So if that suits everybody, I'll just go around as I see the boxes here on the screen. And, if you wouldn't mind sharing with all of us what your, just introduce yourself, again, what your interest is in this subcommittee, perhaps your expertise, and what the goals you have would be with respect to sewerage. So I see Bob Fizzari. You are first up. Welcome, sir. It looks like you're on mute. Are you able to unmute yourself there?
There. Can you hear me now?
Yes,
okay.
Perfectly.
My name is Bob Fizzari. I'm a retired residential home builder and developer. I'm representing the Home Builders and Remodelers Association of Connecticut. Along with my colleague here, David Potts, we're also part of the Middlesex Chamber of Commerce, who has an interest in this matter and has been very active in that field for a number of years.
Great. Any goals, Bob, that you hope to have set forth by this subcommittee?
Well, what we've been attempting for a number of years is to get the Department of Health to recognize the reduced water usage that the building codes are requiring of builders and developers. And that water usage means, reduced water usage means less water is going into the public, not the, well, into the public sewer system, but also into septic systems. The current design standard for septic systems for residential homes and apartments is 150 gallons per day, per bedroom. And it's nowhere near that. It's between 50 and 75 gallons per day. And at the department's own initiative, they have determined that the first bedroom of more than a two or a three or a four uses more water than the second and third and fourth. And that the change in the code should reflect that to some degree, recognizing that the third and fourth adds almost nothing to the requirements of the system, mainly because they're either unused or they certainly don't use it in the same proportion as the always occupied first bedroom. So that's a major change. The other is the reserve area appears to have never been used for its intended purpose, and it wastes land. It wastes property, and so we get an inefficient use of property, even where the zoning would allow it, because of that. There are a number of other issues that are more highly technical. They're smaller. David could expand on that, but those are the two big ones, which would give us better effective use of the land and reduce cost of the system.
All right, thanks so much, Bob. I appreciate that, and I appreciate not only the introduction, but really the framework of the problem as you see it, or the issues that you see. Dave Potts.
Well, good afternoon. Dave Potts. I work with Geomatrix. So I have about 20 years experience with on-site systems and previously designing municipal wastewater treatment plants. We work in 20 states, so with on-site, and have a lot of experience with AT in certain regions. So I work, I guess, with the Developers Council on certain issues, and also I serve on the board of Connecticut On-Site Wastewater Association. I think that's kind of the general background for me.
Anything in terms of goals or problem framework as you see it?
Well, I guess the goals would be to best protect the environment, but while still allowing growth that doesn't negatively affect the environment. And I think there's a number of things that could be done in Connecticut to do that. And some of them really boil down to differences between how the DEP looks at things and how the Department of Health looks at things. And I think perhaps we could look at some of those differences are very enlightening in terms of what would work and what would give us opportunities in Connecticut to achieve those objectives.
All right, thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Brian, I see you are on my screen next.
Okay. My name's Brian Tunney. I'm a realtor in Connecticut. And my goal here, and I'm also on the board of the Connecticut Association of Realtors and also on the Greenwich Association of Realtors. My goal here is to allow advanced septic treatment systems to be used to protect the environment and as well as allow growth at a reasonable cost. As Bob said earlier, the requirements for septic systems are from the 50s when there was a lot more water being used. It is not. The other thing is that the advanced treatment systems are monitored by the manufacturer. And even if they're not monitored by the manufacturer, they provide the same results as a non-advanced septic treatment system. So I believe that is something that would be good for the state. And a lot of the pollution coming into Long Island Sound and into the waters of Connecticut are from failed septic systems. And this would help that issue.
Okay, great. And as we're talking through this, it's sort of obvious that agenda today is going to be a bit fluid because I think we're delving into some of the issues that are later on in the agenda. It just makes a lot of sense, though, that we're talking about goals and objectives as we're trying to frame the problems as we see them. So, and it sounds like, Brian, you're highlighting some potential the need for some potential regulatory updates.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Alicia.
Hey folks, Alicia Sharmat. I'm the Executive Director of Rivers Alliance of Connecticut. I'm here to provide an environmental perspective that any decisions we make or any pathways forward are protective of water quality, and to ensure that any of the water quality issues we're experiencing now that will likely get progressively worse over the next few years. You know, we're looking at things like blue-green algae in our lakes, bacteria and nutrient pollution in our rivers and in Long Island Sound. And ATS will be a good tool in solving some of those problems, but we must have the regulation and oversight for this. As we heard from DPH at the last meeting, which I had to watch because I missed it, but these ATS systems have to be monitored in order for them to work properly. And so that oversight is extremely important. But we also need to make sure that we're not looking at only a blanket nitrogen standard for that. To be protective of water quality, we need to make sure that any systems that are put in place in areas that might have a TMDL for nitrogen maybe are a little bit more stringent. So we really need to think a lot about water quality in general when we're thinking through this, and also to make sure that, you know, the utilization of these systems don't spawn inappropriate development in areas that, you know, maybe are already, you know, carved out for conservation or are part of, you know, we're following our plans of conservation and development in our towns and our state, and that these systems don't, like I said, spawn inappropriate development. So.
Thanks, Alicia. I appreciate that perspective. Jen from D.
Hi, good afternoon. Jennifer Perry. I'm the Bureau Chief for Materials Management and Compliance Assurance at Department of Energy and Environmental Protection. My initial experience with the department, I worked for 17 years in the on-site wastewater program where the department regulates the larger septic system. So basically what at that time was greater than 5,000 gallons per day, which is now greater than 7,500 gallons per day. And also those systems that are deemed to be alternative treatment systems. After that time, I had also overseen our municipal wastewater facilities programs in the Clean Water Fund. So I have experience also in the construction and funding of municipal sewer systems. So that's sort of my background. Obviously, I'm here representing the regulatory agency. And I think from my perspective, one of the things that Alicia, I think, stated is really also where we're coming from, not wanting to see inappropriate development. I think from the department's perspective, we've seen that sort of sewage disposal has been used as a de facto zoning tool for decades. And I think, you know, I think it's important for people to understand that the state and local plans of conservation and development are really critical. Identifying where it's appropriate for additional development is going to be, I think, really an underlying need here. Where we're talking about supporting additional growth, that's fine, and infrastructure needs to support that, but really it needs to happen in appropriate areas.
All right, thanks, Jen, for that. All right, let's see. I've got, well, we've got DPH on, right? Mr. Pollock.
Hi, good afternoon. Matt Pollock, supervising sanitary engineer for the on-site sewage disposal system program at DPH, otherwise known as the Environmental Engineering Program. So I'm here to observe and provide comments if people want to hear our perspective on what's being discussed today.
Thanks, Matt. Nelson.
Yeah, okay, very good. Let's see, I'm the chairman of the Brookfield WPCA. And so the interest is really town issues and trying to do the best for our customers in order to have a cost-effective systems and without, and then also deal with the environmental issues. One of the projects we have pending is to put a sewer system in about 1,000 homes right on Candlewood Lake. And so it's the largest lake in Connecticut. So it has to do with, that would provide less nutrients going into the Housatonic, finally Lake Winona down to Lake Zor into the Long Island Sound. And so where it's to be treated instead of just, because a properly working septic system still puts nutrients in the waterways. And many people don't appreciate that. They just say, well, my system's working fine, but it works as it was designed, but the design isn't to take out the nutrients. As far as I'm also working highly active with the Connecticut Water Environmental Association. They just changed their name from the Connecticut Association of WPCAs and merged with another group. And then, what we're finding is that I think this issue needs to be dealt with maybe at the state level and maybe from legislation. And that is when we're dealing with issues of water and with wastewater, there's a number of jurisdictions involved, and when you start talking about one that's like you start talking about one, the others fog over. So we have the Department of DPH, we have DEEP, we have Pura, we have the building codes we talked about. They're totally separate. And so it ends up being a complete sort of, there's sort of some, I guess, institutional dysfunction, across the different groups, because, for example, Connecticut DEEP recommends that no septic system be put in general in anywhere less than 2 acres. And then there's this other group that wants to say, well, we should have a maximum, this new one, Segregate Connecticut, the maximum zoning plot size should be a 1/4 acre and just use a system that'll work in a 1/4 acre. Well, you can't have both. And so then the other thing is that when new construction goes in, as a WPCA, we'd like to mandate low or water sense fixtures. And there's nothing in the building code that we can't, a sewer group can't mandate building codes. So anyway, there's some dysfunction there where the building codes, it would make sense to use water sense fixtures, but on the other hand, it can't be mandated. So you just have to use honey instead of a stick in order to make it happen with the, then the other thing that's happening from the perspective of a small town is that there's a complete, it's like a big freight train requiring incentive and affordable housing. It has to be looking to be 10% of the housing. So the Council of Small Towns has weighed into it. Small towns don't have the infrastructure to put in sewers or to expand their sewer system in such a way to allow the 830G and other incentive and affordable housing projects. So there's a complete these are two freight trains running on the same track in opposite directions, and there's going to be a collision at some point where there's going to be it would be a huge increase in cost burden for a town to put in the infrastructure to handle the housing. So the affordable housing is going to be less affordable than they really think. It's a more complex equation than just say, okay, let's put in affordable housing. But if you add in the infrastructure cost to make that happen, and nobody is looking at it in a comprehensive way, so this group might be able to sort of put the lights on so that it's far more comprehensive and taking into account DPH interest, deep, PURA, building codes, and the housing business altogether.
Thanks, Nelson. I appreciate that. And I think you provided a real overarching framework of what sort of initiated the subcommittee, out of the Planning and Development Committee and the greater commission, but the need to really delve into further development and affordable housing and how that works, with sewerage and the constraints that many towns have with respect to sewerage. So I appreciate that framework that you've provided. Dan from OPM.
Hi there, Dan Morley. I guess that was just a good segue from Nelson. I am the Assistant Director here in the Intergovernmental Policy Division of OPM. My job is to advise the Secretary of OPM on cost and benefits, if you will, of state investments in infrastructure and other types of state grant programs. The tool that my group uses to gauge that is the State Plan of Conservation and Development, which is the state's comprehensive plan and was actually just adopted by the General Assembly a few weeks ago. In any event, what my staff and I look at really are, kind of summarized already, the costs and benefits, the cost to state taxpayers with subsidizing infrastructure. Is it being done effectively, efficiently? Does it contribute to the costs of sprawling development patterns and impacts on environmental, natural, and cultural resources? So taking a balanced look at what are we getting for our buck? Is it a net positive, or does it come with significant costs? And finally, we'd like to think of, even though it's not necessarily our purview, is what is the cost to local taxpayers? Certainly extending infrastructure does have long-term costs associated with it, but it obviously produces benefits, at least in the short run, with regard to potential new development. But we have to always be aware of there's costs associated with allowing for different types of land use patterns to develop as a result of that.
Great, thanks so
My
much.
perspective, and happy to be part of this group.
Glad to have you participating. Thomas Armstrong.
Thank you. Tom Armstrong. I am an environmental attorney. I've been so for 35 years. I've been on Avon's AWPCA for at least 10 years on it. And I did provide Alex quite an extensive suggestion list of about 7 pages or so of things that they could think of, some which is legislative, some of which is further information and investigative and the like. But just to cover a few topics, I think Nelson and I are pretty much aligned from a perspective of towns to a large extent. I agree with his comments with regard to overlapping and conflicting agency difficulties, particularly when it comes to enforcement issues, major problem. I agree with his water sense requirements there. I've been able to get those in Avon because the contractors are actually billed by water usage for that. And therefore, it's in their incentive to implement water sense appliances, even though that's not part of the current construction requirements. Some of the other things that I have mentioned are that could possibly relate to legislative action. would be, I would suggest that a look be taken with regard to the common interest ownership or condominium associations. These are literally minor cities in which they are in charge of repair and replacement of their own sanitary and storm sewers, and also water, drinking water, if that is the case there. But I think there's some deficiencies there. Since Avon uses interlocal agreements, I think both DPH and DEP would probably prefer that most people be on sewer systems as opposed to septic systems. But there's a couple items there where they could boost and encourage interlocal agreements so that other municipalities can tie into sewer lines of those that are already established. I'll disagree a little bit with Bob. I have in Avon seen areas where the reserve capacity for septic systems have been used on that. I don't say that's it, but I'd be willing to take a look at whether the reserve requirements need to be as large as they are. Clearly in Avon, perhaps in Nelson, your town too, where I've seen a lot of failures are in about the 60s and 70 installations. And a lot of those were basically leaching pits and not leach fields, which have created some problems there. And I've suggested one idea that I know is very controversial, and I don't know whether it would receive any sunlight or not, but I suggested that with regard to beneficial assessments. Now, beneficial assessment is an assessment that is applied to the owners, I'll say homeowners or businesses that are benefited by a sewer extension line. These are paid for by them and not paid for really generally by the municipality or generally by all people that are connected. But I've suggested that if the prevailing wage could be removed from that, it would make it more affordable for homeowners to connect into sewers. But that only applies to the benefit assessment. It does not apply for pump stations and things like that, which are generally picked up and provided for by the WPCA or the town. I have others, but I'll let other people talk.
I appreciate that, Thomas. And Jim Bonoy.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Jim Bonoy, I'm with DPH. I'm the section chief for the environmental health section, which includes our sewage section. Like Matt said, we're here really to listen to a lot. We have our regulatory responsibilities, which we look to. Obviously, we'll work with our local health partners on a lot of this also. There's a lot of things to learn from this group, and I think that's what we really want to do is listen to what's going on, hear from others, and also for some of the new technologies, it's been tried in other places. I think, in the future, we can invite some of these other states in Massachusetts and others who've tried the AT systems and learn from them how it's worked there, what hasn't worked. I think that could be a role we could also play, is helping set up some of this in the future.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate that perspective. We're often, legislatively looking to other states, certainly to provide models for us. And I think that's an important point you make. Bill Neal.
Hi, thanks for having me. I live in Westbrook. I've been on the planning commission for 15, 16 years. Worked on 2 plans of conservation and development. Currently, I'm the chair of the implementation committee for the plan of conservation and development and the affordable housing plan. I'm also on the regional planning committee, and I'm on a board member of Hope Partnership. So I think there's very good consensus in Westbrook that we want to make the sound cleaner, the Patchogue and Minnetonka rivers cleaner, and provide a denser walkable town center with affordable housing that's accessed by public transport, so that people in the lower paying jobs don't have to have a car, don't have to travel a long ways to work. And most of the complications have been enumerated, so I won't go into them. But further background is that as a Peace Corps volunteer, I was trained at the Army Corps of Engineer base in Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri in 1976, and went on to build clean wells just north of the Sahara Desert in Tunisia and convince people to build outhouses. So I got, and then as many years as an industrial plant manager, I was involved in industrial waste treatment systems in Connecticut, France, Mexico, and China. So a lot of different bureaucracies, and I know the technical ability exists to achieve Westbrook's goals, and it's a matter of allowing them, experimenting, and making sure we have the right means, and then creating the legal system for the towns to do that.
Thanks, Bill. Yeah, you provide an important perspective with your years of expertise and what you bring to the table. So I appreciate that. And I think you're right. You know, we've heard from DPH and DEP that technically we can get there. It's just a balancing act and making sure that we're treading carefully and being mindful of the environment and the implications there, but also recognizing that development is really important for Connecticut's future. So appreciate that perspective. And next we go to Dan Lent.
Hi, thank you very much. I'm Dan Lent from Easton, Connecticut. I'm a lifelong resident of Easton, but I've lived all around the world. My background is I have a degree in physics and then another undergrad degree in English and finance and a law degree. My office is up in Hartford. So I guess, my goal is, first of all, to listen to others and, hopefully we can form a consensus and talk about this in an educated way, because, some of the opinions that you see are really from very uninformed. And, I think that Desegregate Connecticut is a perfect example. When you listen to these people, they have these young people who, look like they're right out of high school, and they're making very important policy recommendations, and they don't have the scientific background. They don't have a life experience. And, so I would really, I think we should be careful who we listen to. So I sent some emails around about that, because the reason I'm involved is that, I'm on the front lines down here in Easton. And one of the points I want to make is that Fairfield County is very different than the rest of the state. When I go up to Hartford, I feel like, I'm in Massachusetts or something, or when you go out to Brooklyn on the East. So I think everyone should just think about where they're from in the state and realize that Fairfield County is it's different. First of all, Western Long Island Sound is a failure pollution wise. And you can look at the Save the Sound Soundkeepers report, and you can see that it's highly polluted. And a lot of it comes from New York City. So the idea that you can just have more density in Fairfield County, I mean, I've just been seeing the roads now. It looks like the Long Island Expressway every day. Like it's just so crowded now. I don't understand how we could fit any more people into Fairfield County by destroying zoning. And I guess the other thing, I just want to share my opinion that, please don't be naive. There's a lot of money to be made by coming into towns, breaking zoning, and building multifamily units. You make a fortune doing that. It started in New Jersey with the Mount Laurel cases. So please don't be naive or misled by greedy real estate developers. And a lot of these affordable housing issues, and they're saying people have a right to a house. How on earth do you have a right to a house in America if you don't earn the money and pay for it? It's like saying I have a right to a Ferrari. You know, I would have to go out and earn that money. And there are lots of affordable places in Connecticut, like go up to what, Brooklyn or the eastern side. The only really overcrowded parts of Connecticut is Fairfield County and the shoreline. And, you know, there's a lot of affordable housing everywhere else. So just please don't be naive. When you drive around Connecticut, you know, north of 84 or whatever, there's lots of land, there's lots of cheap housing all over Connecticut. And so what the problem is, again, getting back to me being on the front lines, I've been involved in Black Rock Harbor, has a wastewater treatment plant that's completely out of date. And every time it rains, raw sewage goes into the harbor. The state won't, you know, give it the money needed to fix it. So I've been involved in Clean Water Act citizen suits ever since law school. You know, we like to say we're like the Lorax. We speak for the trees. So I'm you know, a very hardcore environmental activist. Right now, I'm involved in a wetlands lawsuit in Easton. So the reason I'm involved in this is because I'm in the front lines and I see, you know, these radical left-wing groups that are just coming in and all they want to do is profit and say they're helping poor people. They're not helping poor people by destroying Euclidean zoning. There's nothing wrong with Euclidean restrictive zoning. If my neighbor wants to build a nuclear power plant, we use restrictive zoning to prevent it. There's nothing prima facie bad about the word restrictive, but they somehow say, you know, we're discriminating against poor people by doing proper planning. So I guess I'm just coming at it from a front lines perspective. And I think Long Island Sound and Fairfield County is different than the rest of the state. We should have less sewage, fewer people. We shouldn't be encouraging more people and more density and more housing in Fairfield County because it's overcrowded. We can't even cope with the sewage that we have in Fairfield County. And I can send you, I'm happy to send you reports, and I said the thing today because it's clear that, you know, there are people probably in this group and who want legislation to reduce the environmental regulations needed, you know, to put sewage treatment plants in place in Connecticut and in Fairfield County. You know, new technology is great, but what they're saying is use the new technology to build cluster homes and build multifamilies and break zoning so outside developers or any developer can make a lot of money. Then the town gets stuck trying to maintain these little mini wastewater treatment plants and all the nitrogen and all the pollutions going into the sound. So at least in Fairfield County, we don't need any more sewage. We don't need any more wasting of water. And every person generates wastewater when you take a shower, you do your laundry. We don't need more people in Fairfield County. And the rest of the state is uncrowded mostly. So just, I'm dumbfounded at times by these arguments, especially when you listen to desegregate Connecticut, which is offensive, by the way, there's nothing about segregation in Connecticut. It's offensive to the people who actually went through actual segregation in Jim Crow to somehow, you know, use that name. And then they make all kinds of racist statements, you know, against white people. They say, oh, well, it's all white old men on zoning boards. You know, that's like saying it's all African Americans in the NBA. I mean, of course, you know, they just make these illogical arguments. So I just hope people understand the overall context that we're basically, you know, in a big fight, almost in a war, to preserve our local control of zoning, because that's what has made Connecticut great. Local control of zoning, and it's why it's not ruined. All you have to do is go to, you know, why did we have the Clean Water Act? Because of Love Canal, because of places that were ruined. We don't want to ruin Connecticut, because once it's ruined, you can't get it back. So that's what I'm trying to just, you know, keep this in context.
Thank you. I appreciate your perspective, Mr. Len. I would just say, I think, you know, we want to clear up any misconceptions about what this group is tasked with. I think, we're not looking to give away housing for free in the state of Connecticut. I think, what the framework that's been presented to us is, that there is a need for more affordable housing in the state of Connecticut. And, what that looked like many years ago and what that looks like now is very different. And just as sewerage has changed over the years, and we're gaining new technologies to provide the balance between development and environmental considerations, I think we need to make sure that we're looking at all angles and making it more affordable for people who want to come and live in our beautiful state to be able to do so. Again, not for free, but hardworking people that deserve good schools and beautiful towns, just like you live in Easton. So I think that's what we're talking about here. And I hope everybody can keep an open mind as we go through this process and not, come to the table with a predetermined set of ideas that will only prevent us from moving forward towards real sustainable solutions. Matt, please.
Thank you very much, Senator Cohen. Matt Bogalesi from Old Saybrook, and I wear two hats in this conversation. I am the director of the Community Investment Fund with DECD, and as part of that, water and sewer infrastructure projects are covered for the 54 eligible municipalities. And so that's could be some significant investment over the next 5 to 10 years. And so I'm here in that capacity to observe and hear all these different perspectives on this. And then the other hat is I'm on the Board of Selectmen in Old Saybrook. And as a shoreline town that right now is facing dealing with wastewater issues for about 600 to 700 homes left over from a ruling, I think about 25 years ago for the community. We're trying to move towards a wastewater solution and, go back and forth between what's the right thing, advanced treatment or looking at sewerage and, balancing housing and sustainable growth. And as a chair of our Economic Development Commission for many years, knowing that there's a limitation to what kinds of businesses can come here and what kind of jobs we can bring to the community because of no sewer as a wastewater solution. But we also want to have a clean Connecticut River and a clean sound. And as we look to potentially move forward on an AT solution, and we have these continuing issues, I worry about the money that we're going to invest as a community on this one possible solution, only to potentially, several years down the line now have more septic systems that will be unusable based on sea level rise, along the coast, and needing to spend more taxpayer money to go after a whole different solution. So that's what I bring to the conversation.
Thanks, Matt. I think that's an important point that hasn't been brought up yet. Really looking at the business community, as you mentioned, I hear from constituents all the time about the constraints with development, in towns that are septic only, but also the environmental considerations of putting in more septic systems throughout the state of Connecticut. So I appreciate that perspective. And let's see, Laurie, it looks like you're next, BPH.
Thank you, Senator, and thank you for the opportunity. So I am Laurie Matthews. I'm a branch chief with the State Department of Public Health in Hartford. The branch that I oversee has over 130 positions. We do everything from, we have primacy over drinking water systems statewide. We oversee the Drinking Water State Revolving Loan Fund and the infrastructure funding that's coming in for safe drinking water. We also, as Jim mentioned, another side of my group is the environmental health section. Jim Bonoy works in my group, and he oversees the what I call the septic group where Matt Pollock works. So we oversee quite a few other things in between. A few things from my perspective, and the hat that hat that I wear, along with the hat that I wear on the Water Planning Council. which is made up of 4 agencies, DPH being one of them, DEEP being another, OPM, and PURA. The Water Planning Council, just to maybe address one item that was brought up previous about water conservation and the Water Sense program. Under the state water plan, that's been a priority, not just particularly Water Sense, but water conservation. So that's something I think we could merge together. I know there are a lot of people mentioned conservation, and it does dovetail into septics and drinking water. I think what I've heard, Senator, a lot is about the need to protect the environment, but also, and from our perspective in public health, the need to protect public health at the same time. I think working with my colleagues, Jennifer Perry, as you heard from, and also Graham Stevens at DEEP, these are things that moving forward, we certainly can work together on. One item that my commissioner, Manisha Jatani, is adamant about is health equity. We haven't heard that word mentioned yet, but equity, health equity to us means that you have equitable, abilities for people to be healthy, across, whether you can afford it or not. It is important to think about health equity, and all of that works within the policies and the programs that we develop. So I think that conservation, water conservation is one thing we should think about. It will help with everything that we're talking about here. Also for septics, and listening to Bob and Nelson and Tom, we have a very good program that Matt oversees, and to listen to changes and technical changes. We want to continue to foster that and hear the changes that are necessary. Again, we oversee the smaller septic systems in the state of Connecticut, but we know that working together with DEEP and the local communities, along with Council of Governments, I think they're a key player in all of this to talk through in regions of the state. And, fundamentally, I do agree that every region of the state is different, and not one state policy can apply the same in different areas. And so every area, every council of government, I think, needs to be involved in these conversations. Costs, CCM, to have discussions about the different needs. Water and sewer should also be thought together. In my world, it's one of the things that we constantly think about. And also, my other hat that I wear is volunteered for 20-something years in my Inland Wetlands Commission. So, I see the local needs and work with the local towns. And when a lot of you mentioned that you volunteer on behalf of your town, I think when you do that, you get a whole different level of perspective. And so, I've enjoyed that to be able to volunteer for so long and to help serve my town. I think it does bring a different perspective when you see the struggles that towns have just to do some of the most basic things. So, I think we're not going to solve it today, but, Senator, I'm glad we're having this conversation because I think there's a lot of great perspectives here. So thank you.
Thanks, Laurie. I agree with you wholeheartedly. I see, last but not least, Alexis Harrison. Alexis, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here. I'm sorry. Hi, everybody. Alexis Harrison. I live in Fairfield. I'm a member of the Zoning Commission. We have an elected board. I've also been involved with a lot of environmental issues in Fairfield as well. I'm first of all here to learn. Obviously, this is a very important issue as it relates to zoning. I also feel that sewage permitting and plant capacity is a local issue, so I want to ensure this remains a local issue and jurisdiction, and look forward to working with everybody and learning. Thank you.
Thanks so much. And I just really want to reiterate how much I appreciate everybody. Oh, I'm sorry, David, I didn't see you.
No, that's okay. I knew we were running short on time.
Skip right over you. I apologize.
That's okay. That's okay. I'll be quick. I'm an assistant director of transportation planning at DOT, and I manage the Office of Strategic Planning and Projects. And I volunteered to be on this board because I, maybe not wrongly, but I assumed that we'd be looking at sort of the extent of the existing sewer and water systems and trying to understand the kind of the constraints on it, where we have adequate supply, where we don't, where we have demand, and kind of look for a sort of a strategic plan for where we invest in its expansion and maintenance, and then where we need additional demand and where we don't. What I've learned is we're really focusing on a different aspect of how this infrastructure, whether it is septic or sewer systems, how we look to it when we do transportation planning. So as most of you know, there's we have a lot of trains, buses, and there's always an interest in light rail. But one of the factors we always consider when we look at investing in new transit systems or expanding systems is a cost and benefit analysis. And the cost is always the capital cost, but the benefits are the ability to increase ridership, and that's people to jobs as well as people to other trips that they might make, employment centers or residential centers. And a key component to that is density. So density results in greater ridership. Greater ridership has a lot of benefits, including reducing the subsidy that we all pay for transit in any state. And that's just a phenomenon that's not unique to Connecticut. Every transit system is subsidized. But one of the key components to ridership potential is the carrying capacity of the sewer system, whether it be septic or sewer and water. So I think I'm going to learn a lot, but I just wanted to say that's sort of my perspective. So when we do look at the ability to expand our transit network, we do look at what the capacity is to increase density, and different transit services work on different levels of density. Light rail requires a higher density, probably the highest of any type of public transit. And then you have fixed route bus service, dedicated bus BRTs like CT Fast Track, and then heavy rail, or also known as commuter rail. But I just want to offer that perspective. So we certainly do consider the presence of septic versus sewer systems and water supply systems when we look at where we can and can't invest in transit around the state. So thank you very much.
Thanks so much, David. I appreciate that, especially just riding Shoreline East on Monday and recognizing that there are many seats available to fill on Shoreline East. I would love to see ridership up, but obviously another balancing act for us, and needs some serious thought and consideration. So I again appreciate all of these different perspectives. I think we've got a really great working group here, and each bringing unique expertise to the table. And I think we will be able to drive towards solutions. But I think, as we all heard today, there's not any one singular problem or issue that we need to address. There are many, so this is multifaceted and will require some significant time on all of our parts and consideration. And again, I just ask everybody to come at this with an open mind, as I'm trying to do as well, and try to deeply understand the issues. This is highly technical. Certainly, I don't have the expertise in sewerage. I don't think my co-chair does either. So we're coming at this trying to help moderate, and certainly there will be things, I think, that come out of the subcommittee that are legislative in nature and suggesting legislative changes and proposals. And I think there will be some regulatory suggestions. And then I think there will be some potential recommendations that don't require either, but require other folks' consideration as well. So I think, I'd be interested to hear from the group if there's any show of hands, but, what I'm hearing is that there are some topics that will certainly require much more discussion and insight. And so I think we're going to have to break down the issues and sort of approach it that way, and maybe have some meetings, subcommittee meetings that delve into the environmental issues, and have some experts come and talk to us, and we can have some discussions around that, and maybe have some further in-depth discussions around alternative treatment systems as well. Have some discussions on agency collaboration, and how we can more effectively move forward with some of these systems. And so I think, as we go through these notes, I think all of us will need to review, but I think we'll, if anybody has any thoughts on what those overarching issues are and where we should really delve deeper, and be happy to hear it. We could also, if folks want to email Alex and Ashley or Donna and myself, and we can start to, put together a list of those larger issues, that this will begin to take shape like an outline that we can really move forward with meetings around those subtopics. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. We should break it down into sub segments or subtopics, because this is pretty broad overview we just had from each other. And then at some point, if it'd be possible that we could meet at, together, or at least a sub, so that we're not Zooming, and it's a little bit awkward and fatigue inducing to be Zooming. But if we get together, it's a little more energizing. And so I don't know if that can happen at some point in the future. It seems to me it should be able to. It just costs money to get to someplace. So
I agree, Nelson. I think that should be our goal, to at least meet a few times in person, and especially once we gather more information on these sort of subtopics, and then we can gather together to discuss what we've learned. Dave.
I guess I have a question, or maybe it's a comment, but when people talk about AT, it means a lot of different things to different people. And when somebody says, I want AT, I work with AT systems every day. We do thousands and thousands of systems a year in many different states. And the question we always have when somebody comes to us and says that, we say, well, what are your real goals and objectives? We can tell you how to achieve that. It might be AT, it might be a sewer, it might be what in Connecticut is considered traditional technology, but can achieve the same thing. So I think that would be helpful if people could help us understand what the goals and objectives are. Then we could help identify what the options might be to get that, because there may be a variety of options.
Thanks for that, Dave. I think that's an important consideration. So I think if we, that may be something that we can discuss more as we delve into alternative treatment systems. Bill.
Yeah, maybe even adding on to that, I'd love to see kind of what the alternatives are that exist, and of those, which ones are permittable in Connecticut. Not so much to say they all should be permittable or whatever, but just to have it as sort of total picture of the technical environment, and with all respecting that there's reasons why something might work someplace and not be permittable here.
Yeah, I like that. As we mentioned earlier, I think it'll be very important to look at what other states are doing as well, and understand if there's something that they're doing well and effectively that we could really be modeling after here in Connecticut. Dan.
So just to pick up on that, and kind of getting to what David Elder said before about, the bigger picture, what we were just talking about really on the technical side is the purpose of why we have the Connecticut Environmental Policy Act. So whenever a state agency is proposing to undertake a particular action, they have to look at potential alternatives for how to satisfy their purpose and need. So really what we're talking about, and what I think David was speaking to, was what is sort of our purpose and need for expansion of water and or sewer to any particular area. And, again, we all have kind of expressed why whether it's, for affordable housing, or whether it's for, how does that benefit for potential public transportation purposes and so forth and so on, protecting the environment. Once we know what a proposed action is, why we might want to address it from a statewide standpoint, we then can look at the technical options at how best to address that. And that's done in a public manner through the Environmental Policy Act. So just wanted to point that out there. Trying to get into the weeds at this stage is really going to be, you can look at any particular town, any particular area in a town and get lost in the weeds real quick.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you for that. All right, I see. Oh, Brian, do you have a question? Comment?
I would just like, I was going to ask you earlier, but I've got a report done, a white paper report called Wells, Septic and Sewer Systems. That was done by the Legal Research Center, Inc. in November 2021. It's quite arduous. It's about 200 pages, but it looks at these systems throughout the entire country. It's something I'd be happy to share with you, or if you think it's too much. Either way.
I always think it's great to have more information rather than less. So I think it might be nice to, if you want to send that to Alex and Ashley, we can have that distributed. Also, Jen was kind enough to share a map of Connecticut's sewer systems versus septic towns, water pollution control authorities. And so we'll get that distributed to the subcommittee as well. I think that these are important for all of us to learn a little bit more about. And so this will be helpful as we sort of navigate the waters. So I know we have, so like I said, I think what we'll do is we'll sort of go through what was mentioned today, the problems as we see it. We'll try to determine sort of those sub bullets that we'll want to dive into a little bit deeper, and plan on having some meetings around those sub bullets. And I know we have a meeting of the Greater Commission coming up. I believe that's on June 6th. So I saw a question also, when is our report due? Initially it was next session, 2023, but that's been pushed back by a year, which I think is really important to sort of allow the subcommittees of the Greater Commission to really do the work and not just put out some haphazard recommendations. As you can see, at least our subcommittee is going to be quite work intensive, to really figure out, where we are now and where we think we should go. And, again, multifaceted. So this is not an easy solution. So I think it's going to take some time. So we'll have time to continue to meet and discuss, and hopefully by the end of this process, come up with some sound proposals that keep in mind and strike that balance between the environment and Connecticut's development. So I appreciate everybody's time today and input, and look forward to seeing you at our next meeting. Donna, did you have any comments as we're wrapping up?
No, thank you. I
I see
appreciate
you
it.
back online. Yeah.
Thanks to
Good.
Comcast.
Yeah, good. All right, everybody, enjoy the day.
Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.
Thank you.